Good morning and welcome to Sunday Morning Magazine. Today I have 4 people in the studio. You'll recognize Jakky Lynette from the Oklahoma County League of Women Voters.
Hey!
And we also have Jay Watson, who is taking a video of us. You won't be able to hear her, but just wave. And Whitney
Mullica.
I should be wearing my glasses, I can't see that. Whitney Mullica, the Vice Director of Oklahomans for Responsible Transportation, and Rob Norman, Attorney for Oklahomans for Responsible Transportation.
My name's a little easier. There you go.
I'm so glad you guys are all here. Jakky, you are the queen. I mean, you bring all these great issues to the program, so I have to say thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Whenever people call me queen, I say, I'm a goddess.
You are a goddess! Jakky the goddess.
That's right. I have it tattooed on my leg, actually.
Okay, I will no longer call you the queen from this moment forward.
It's all good. But in my goddess-like structure, so for the League of Women Voters, we have a thing called the Impact on Issues, which is produced when we have our national conventions, and that states all of the positions that all of the leagues across the United States come together and support as a whole. Okay. And we have a position on natural resources, which is to promote an environment beneficial to life through the protection and wise management of natural resources in the public interest. And then we also say that public understanding and participation in decision making is essential. It is an essential element of responsible and responsive management of our natural resources. So in meeting Jay, I met her at the Thunder Women's Day. I then met Whitney here, and of course, they're with the Oklahomans for Responsible Transportation, and they were talking about how eminent domain ties into the turnpikes and everything that they're advocating for. And one thing that I think that people need to be aware of is the eminent domain, but also land speculation. So I want to hand it over to her to introduce herself, and please talk about the land speculation and eminent domain, please.
Thank you, Jakky. Yes, my name's Whitney Mullica, and I'm with Oklahomans for Responsible Transportation. And we are mostly advocating at the legislature, trying to get common sense legislation passed that would really make the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority have to clean up their act a little bit, because they don't really have the same rules as ODOT maybe would, or the Oklahoma Department of Transportation. But yes, the land speculation, it's interesting to kind of start looking at the different turnpike projects. You see the same pattern of growth with the same developers and the same, mindset, really, and it just starts to make you wonder, like, we are already in a fragile housing market. How is this going to affect people who do get displaced? Are they going to be able to find a place to go after that? So not only are we concerned with the environmental side of it, with the watershed and all of that, but just from a human standpoint, are people going to have a place to go?
Yes, exactly. Jay was talking to me before we began today, and we were talking about the fact that in some cases, basically somebody turns up and says, oh, by the way, we're going to build a turnpike on this land, so, and then what? Do they have to give you the land? How does that work?
Yeah, how does that work?
Do they have to give you the land? Well, there's a couple of questions you have to answer. One, can they take it?
I'm asking you.
This
is something I don't know anything about. I'm trying to.
Now, we're involved in a fight over everything here. Nothing's off the table in the fight.
Okay.
We are involved in a fight with, can they take it?
Okay.
Should they take it? Those can be, can they legally take it? We're involved in a fight over, can they even take it?
So that's why we're paused at the moment on the turnpike.
Partly. That's partly it. Can they take this land, and can they legally build these turnpikes? Then you have to answer the question: should they? The moral question: should they?
Right, because if you you show up at somebody's family farm and say, "Yeah, you've got plenty of land here. We're just gonna take this several hundred acres and use it for something else." Well, if they grew up with that land, how are they going to pass that along to their
right? And even if we answer the question, can they take it, as a yes, which is an extremely complicated question that will take years to legally unravel still, The should they take it, as Whitney alluded to and Jakky alluded to, has to do with affordable housing crisis. The people who take land tend to come in first and lowball their way with the homeowners, many of whom don't have legal representation, at least when the knock comes at the door, and don't have realtors and don't have appraisers in their army like the condemning authority, the Turnpike authority does, and they don't know what's a good offer or not. And they often get into a situation, especially in affordable housing crisis time, where they're not made whole in these things.
Because they still have to then go and find someplace else to live.
Yes, and that's extremely difficult right now to say, well, this property you're in is worth X, but you have to go live in Y.
And I have a really good example of this in my job. I help people who are on Social Security and Medicare, and I met a gentleman who had literally just paid off his mortgage the day that we were sitting there talking, and I was like, well, that's such an accomplishment, congratulations. And then he pulls out another letter and he's like, well, it doesn't matter, the Turnpike Authority is going to take it. And he's like, what am I supposed to do? I've been disabled for X amount of years.
And I finally paid off my mortgage, and now what?
Where am I going to go?
Oh.
And they can fight, and attorneys can represent them on good terms that will allow a homeowner maybe to be able to afford the fight monetarily, but can they afford the fight emotionally? That can last for years. And especially when we look at places like where they're putting these turnpikes, they're not just putting these turnpikes over some place where someone moved there yesterday and they want to leave. The land's been there for generations.
Family farms.
People purposely moved out there to stay there and not have this sort of thing happen. And so now they are seriously in a stressful, emotional problem where the litigation can go on for years, deciding whether they can take it and how much they owe for the taking. And beyond the legalities of it, it just becomes a terrible thing.
The whole thing's just giving me the ick right now.
Yeah.
It's just a terrible situation of help. I feel helpless for them at this moment.
Right.
Unfortunately. Yeah, part of our position too is for the protection of public health and our environment. And I know there's something going on in Norman right now. Can you fill us in?
Well, I think if you look at the situation, you've had people that have basically been under duress for the last 2 years. They've had disinvestment in their property, and there really is just a feeling of just being shook up.
Lethargy.
Yeah, and so I think the mental health aspect of it, like we're already seeing the effects of that, but if they do construct the proposed routes, you're going to have light pollution, noise pollution, you're going to have the CO2 emissions that are going to be, exacerbated by having more concrete and more cars going through.
Well, and that's not even attacking the problem of, like you were saying, the watershed, all of the species that are living there currently. I mean, yeah, to a certain extent, we're always relocating the wildlife to make room for people.
Water resources and the environment are a major battleground in this thing. Because basically what the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority is wanting to do is they're wanting to put turnpikes that nobody asked for in the public, that nobody thought was coming in the public, and they're wanting to put them in a particular place that is not supposed to be developed like a city. It is land, and it is an area in Cleveland County and Norman that predominantly is supposed to remain as it is, to protect our water supplies in Lake Thunderbird, to protect our wildlife, to protect our land. And the idea is that part of the world is not supposed to be reduced to concrete, both for recreational and for wildlife interests and for our health. They're trying to go up against an impaired lake with 2 turnpikes. That's already an impaired lake and already a problem lake for its water supply and already presents a number of challenges. Unfortunately, the federal government has sent them a stop sign to back off in one area, and hopefully they'll do it in other areas. But yes, this is a different thing than putting in the Turner or the Kilpatrick or something like that. They are literally trying to interfere with a place that wasn't supposed to have turnpikes and mass development put into them.
And we're also talking about, by the time they put that up, you have to pay to use it as well. So,
Yes.
And I'm ignorant of this whole process. This is the first time I've discussed it with anyone. I'm just basically going off of my participation as a driver.
Well, there's the debt limit issue.
Well, there is no debt limit right now. Some of the other authorities, such as the Grand River Dam Authority, at least has a debt ceiling, where the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority doesn't have a debt ceiling. And so their cost overruns are just historically a lot bigger than you get with ODOT. And so in our inflationary environment we are already in, we need to be preventing cost overruns and mismanagement, not being full steam ahead because bankers in New York are going to make a lot of money off of the bonds that get sold.
And refinanced, right? Yeah, sold
Yes.
and refinanced.
Yes, what the Turnpike Authority's business model is literally to issue debt to pay off other debt. That's a lot of what these new turnpikes are about with the Turnpike Authority is being able to issue new debt to sustain the system they already have that is not sustainable without issuing new debt. So they constantly need to put down new routes that they gamble will be money makers. Most of them aren't. They gamble that their new routes will be money makers, and that's what they're doing here. They're gambling that these new routes will be money makers so they can sustain and maintain their entire system, which is unsustainable with the money they have.
Now, just as an outsider, what I'm seeing here is a whole underground machinery of something that's happening above or below our feet that we know nothing about. And if we don't look at it, and if we don't say something about it, they're just going to keep doing what they're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm gonna say officially, my official statement is, I've heard that there was a good old boy nepotism issue, but that's just what I heard. I have no proof of it. But also, I have people that ask me, well, if we pay taxes to build the turnpikes, then why do we also have to pay to get on the turnpike?
It doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, you pay taxes to build interstate highways and state highways and things like that, and that hasn't even been looked at here. Although it's a viable alternative, and we would say it hasn't been looked at here because it requires accountability, it requires input from the public, it requires folks to say, no, you shouldn't put a route here, this is what you should do instead.
But if it's infrastructure and it belongs to us, then we maintain it and we pay for it.
In a perfect world, yes, but I think they've gotten used to being in a, like you said, it's like a machine. It's a system, and it's the forever grow machine, and they don't take tax money the way that the interstate highways do because they have their own revenue.
Right.
And so they get
Or
to,
do they?
Well, they do with the tolls. And so the revenue, comes in, and that's what pays off those revenue bonds until they get refinanced. And so they get to follow different sets of rules.
This is making my brain hurt, dude.
We're sorry.
The theory is they issue bonds, and they issue enough bonds to pay for building the roads, maintaining the roads, and paying off the bonds. But as you can expect, as your debt limit grows and the amount of money you borrow grows, it's just like in your home. Your interest rates of borrowing go up.
More interest, then you have to pay for
Yes,
longer.
yes.
And then the road, all of a sudden, by the time you get there, needs to be repaired, so then you got to pay some.
And let me tell you
Freaking me out.
how crazy it can actually get. I mean, there's stretches of toll roads that are owned by Spanish companies down in Texas because they did let foreign companies come in and build them. And then when the debt wasn't repaid by the tolls, now the Spanish companies, I think it's called Centra, they own the road.
Yeah, one of the turnpikes that looks a lot in Texas that looks a lot like one of the ones they're trying to build from the Kickapoo down to Purcell through Norman on the wrong side of the lake. one of those turnpikes looks a lot like a turnpike some of us know here, which is the Austin bypass, which some of us tend to like because we can go around Austin and go on an 85-mile-an-hour turnpike and pay a lot of toll money to do that. But the history of that turnpike, which is a lot like one of them they're building up here, has been really checkered. Similar to what Whitney mentioned, the original operator of a big stretch of that turnpike had to file bankruptcy because it wasn't sustainable as a turnpike.
Okay, hold 1 second. We're at 15 minutes already.
Okay, I can pull it back. I have
So-
one. Let me get to the last bullet point and then kind of go from there.
I hated to stop you right in the middle of it. Was that a
Yeah.
good stopping place?
Yes.
So
Okay.
let's do a to be continued of this conversation and go again and talk some more about this because obviously we can't do it in 15 minutes.
Yeah. Well, let me say this too. So the last part that I have on here is that we want to promote policies that manage land as a finite resource and incorporate principles of stewardship. And that's where I wanted you to come in and talk about the legislative aspect of it. Would we rather do that and let her cut some of the other part out?
Yeah, we could. Maybe some
Especially
of the,
since
yeah.
Annie Min's open records request has been getting some traction with getting her drumming and all that.
Right.
Might be a good one to bring up.
Yeah. And can we
I might
do that
have
in
to
like
have
2
Jackie
minutes?
help me edit. What do I keep and what do I
Well, do you
Get some more
want to-
sponsors.
what type of legislation do you think you want to focus on?
Well,
Because
no,
there's-
not necessarily. Well, what can people do? Like, we want an action
We
item.
need an
want
action
alert.
What we need to do
okay.
is be able to say, if you want to help,
Yes.
Yeah.
if
Yes.
this is something that you want to speak to,
Yeah. Like, can you do that in like less than, I say, 90 seconds?
yeah.
I think Whitney can say what they can do to help Oklahomans for responsible transportation.
Okay.
And
Okay.
if there's any follow-up, I can do a
Okay.
real
Okay.
quick
So
follow-up.
if this speaks to you in any way, if you're interested in getting involved and finding out more about it, Whitney.
Yes, reach out to your legislators and let them know that you support open government policies, transparency, accountability. We have some specific legislation that we're trying to get through. I believe House Bill 2730 is still in the Senate Judiciary Committee. So all of those committee members could be reached and just, encourage them to move this forward so that we can have more transparency in government.
That was good.
It is. Let's keep continuing to advocate for preservation of the ecosystem.
Definitely. And like I said, we need to come back and talk about this again. Because that's a lot of stuff
Yeah.
for 15 minutes.
I think it might have been a 30-minute podcast. If it's a 15-minute speech, maybe, but if we're going back and forth. And,
Yeah, it's a lot. But
yeah.
the great thing about these conversations is there are a lot of people that don't see the machine beneath our feet. And we need for them to see it so that they can understand what they can do to help.
I agree.
Which is why I love you letting me come.
I will let you come
Yes.
anytime you want, girl, because a goddess is always welcome on this program.
Hey.
when you really start getting on the soapbox of this is just one symptom at the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority of our tendency to more and more autocratic special interest rule.
Mm-hmm.
The special interests and the money takes over the agency, and the agency takes over the legislature and the governor's office, and they're just calling the shots. The special interests and the special interests who are tangled up with the agency. Yeah, they move back and forth with their job. Literally, they move back and forth with their jobs from the agency to the company, to the agency to the company, golden parachute back and forth. Yeah.
Serenity now!
And they've been doing with some of this. They've been doing it under the radar screen for a long time.
That's why we need to shine a light, and that's why I'm so pleased that you guys came in today. We will have you back again. But for now, thank you so much. Jay, who's been silent this whole time.
Silent Jay.
Silent Jay. And has been doing the video for us. We'll be able to see that somewhere, I'm sure. A volunteer facilitator, Jay Watson Patton. Also, Whitney Mullica. Gotta write that. Vice Director of Oklahomans for Responsible Transportation. Rob Norman, attorney for Oklahomans for Responsible Transportation, and the goddess herself. Jakky Lynette
Hey.
from the Oklahoma County League of Women Voters. Thank you guys for
No, I'm just playing.
thank you guys for joining us on Sunday Morning Magazine.
Thank you.
Thank you.